How to have self-respect. There might be some who don't like my answer for this, but psychology is biology. And what do you know? The body, the unconscious, does not like it when one is being tricksy and false. In order to have self-respect, one of many things is one has to become more honest with themselves, about themselves, and to others. Ideally, it's better to start finding safer connections where one can do this, but in my experience, it took a lot of slogging through a lot of crap for a long time before I found those. I don't think this is necessary, but it happened. So that was part of my thing. I suppose one could call that a radical honesty, but it's not that radical. It's not radical to me. I guess it is by comparison, but fuck that. Give me a break. Hey. And the other thing is we're not taught to be like that. I mean, that's a noble thing or whatever, but it's usually it's not exactly rewarded too often, and especially for anybody who's a bit cutting. As a friend pointed out to me some time ago, you got to put some honey on the knife. And that's because there's got to be compassion that comes along with that for self and others. Understanding the right lenses of perception. Not simply seeing through our own. That takes a Rosetta Stone of sorts. Certain kinds of ciphers. Sorry to say, but we are not reptiles. There's a lot of RXs out there for the day-to-day, which don't seem to mention much about the necessity of interpersonal nutrition, the right kind, which would be non-toxic support. Many of us don't know anything beyond toxic support, or maybe are just finding it, or found it after a great deal of trial and error, not even knowing that such things were out there. It's amazing how these things, self-fulfilling prophecies based on upbringing and experience. This is how it is. Having certain kinds of attitudes, like pretending to be unbothered by things which we aren't very well bothered by, that doesn't really help the system either. And anybody who's more manipulative is going to find ways to exploit those things within you, because they are powerful but gentle. Funny thing that. And they can become easily aberrant by anyone who is a bit extra sociopathic. But yeah, self-respect, self-honesty. I mean, that's a big one. There's all kinds of life hacks and things out there for that, which, like for the psyche, and my experience, they're unnecessary. When and if one can start tapping into their unconscious homeostasis, it's all in there. It's just aberrant. We don't know how to listen to it. We don't know the languages of the unconscious. But there's a phenomenal intelligence there in there. And when something becomes aberrant, a system becomes aberrant, it can show up as depression. It can show up as anxiety. These things become aberrant from being like compounds of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So many of us essentially were raised by children, basically. Children with adult brains. So that's scary. So we don't really know any better until we do, and it usually takes a fair amount of finding out to figure it out. Running around in circles over and over and over again. Until hitting a brick fucking wall. And or some version of it. There's a little saying I like to keep in mind, which is soften up. That's much different than toughen up. The octopus had an ancestor a long time ago. It had a shell. This was kind of a very basic version of the octopus. And it didn't get around so well. But at some point along the way, as the story goes, the octopus did something remarkable. It ditched its protection and embraced its vulnerability. And its vulnerability became its greatest strength. I mean, unparalleled. Phenomenal. An absolute enigma. And Octopus is very strong, but it's also very squishy. And I find in softening up, we can level up like this as well. It's very interesting. That which was once feeling like a raw nerve can start developing newer tissues by layering the same kind of soft material over and over and over like a muscle, as opposed to being all stiff and rigid like a shell. This is more, in my experience, in tandem with our underlying psychobiology. This is the more homeostasis expression. It's kind of important, especially with any number of mental and physical ailments and things like that. It's kind of amazing. And just like most people, I didn't know I had CPTSD until finding out the hard way. Over and over and over, hitting that brick fucking wall. No matter how far I'd climb. Kaboom. Crash. Burn. Had to keep finding out new things, looking at things in another way. I imagine there's quite a fair amount of folks out there who can relate to that. What do we typically do when feeling threatened or intimidated or anything like that? Contract. You know, it's interesting. Cells have a very hard time multiplying and surviving when they're in a defensive state. How many of us out there go around in some kind of defensive state in any number of ways deep down every single day? Rigid. Hard. Feel it in the body. Those pains are there for a reason. This is also like a language of the unconscious. There's something in there trying to get our attention. It needs to be looked at, expressed, and it does wonders to have a safe connection or two to have this kind of exchange with. This is a big thing that gets left out. A lot of different kinds of advice out there, but it's a big one. And thankfully, there are people out there like that. That might be alien to a number of our experiences. It certainly was for mine for the vast majority of my life. So much so I wouldn't have even known one if they started talking to me. Probably wouldn't have even known how to connect with somebody like that. Not really. Wouldn't have pinged on my radar in that way, because that's not the kind of interpersonal system I was accustomed to. I had to do a considerable amount of work and finagling and learning to enable that sort of connection to happen. Enabling in the good sense, like enabling your notifications on your phone. Obviously, if you want to get your notifications, you enable your notifications. So, good PR enabling. So yeah, there's some things. I think we'll sit pin in that for now. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time.